304. Totalitarianism. Chalcedon Report Number 83, July the 1st, 1972. Webster's New International Dictionary, in its supposedly conservative second edition, defined totalitarian thus: of or pertaining to a highly centralized government under the control of a political group which allows no recognition of or representation to other political parties, as in fascist Italy or in Germany under the Nazi regime. Several things are wrong with this definition, which is a good example of the fact that even good dictionaries do not always define either too honestly or too well. First of all, the definition is slanted when it comes to citing examples, in that it omits the major totalitarian state, the Soviet Union. Second, and more important, the definition is purely political. Is it of the essence of totalitarianism that it allows no representation or freedom for other political parties? Or is it not rather that it allows no freedom for any element of society at all? Third, and closely related to this, the definition simply ignores the word defined, totalitarian. The word means that the totality of life, men, property, religion, education, and all else are controlled by the state. Just as God, as sovereign Lord and Creator, absolutely governs and ordains all things by his omnipotent counsel and decree, so the totalitarian state plays God, and by its total plan seeks to govern every aspect of life and to conform it to its purposes. Totalitarianism is not new in history. What is new is the added potential for total power which modern communications and transportation media give to the totalitarian state. Ancient Egypt and many states since have been totalitarian. The sovereign and absolute government of God over all things is one that institutions and aspects of the created order have again and again claimed and sought to arrogate to themselves. It is important to analyze some of these totalitarian claims and attempts in order to understand the issue more clearly. Very clearly, the Church in the, quote, medieval, end quote, era did declare itself to be the kingdom of God and the umbrella over all society and all things therein, so that some have referred to the Church then as having been totalitarian. It is easy to see the faults of another era, less easy sometimes to see our own in perspective. The 20th century has already seen, it is said, the death of 100 million people by torture, famine, war, and forced labour. The quote-unquote medieval church at its worst was not totalitarian in the strict sense of the word, because its faith required a denial of any such claim, in that God alone is sovereign Lord and governor of all things. The creed of the church was a witness against every false churchman. It asserted the transcendental, supernatural nature and origin of God's absolute government, so that there was always a built-in judgment against false churchmen. This is very important. True totalitarianism must deny God's transcendental government, law, and counsel. The origin of all things must be here and now, in the universe, within the grasp of man. Totalitarianism and immanence go hand in hand. A philosophy of immanence holds that all essence, being, and power are fully present in the world and exclusively in the world, so that the world is fully governed by its own inherent nature and potentiality. From Hegel through Marx and Darwin, the modern philosophy of immanence received its great expression and made possible modern totalitarianism. Earlier, many areas of science had been totalitarian in their philosophies. Thus, physicists sought, and some still seek, to reduce all reality to physics. Mathematics of an earlier day would only allow a God who was the great mathematician, that is, the built-in cosmic computer of the universe. Reality, in brief, was reduced to a particular institution or discipline, of which men were the governors or interpreters. The same fallacy has marked economics, in that all too many free market advocates under the influence of a philosophy of immanentism have taken this one sphere of law and absolutized it as the only law. We do agree with classical economics as economics, but not as a religious philosophy. When it is converted into a religious philosophy of immanence, it denies validity to any transcendental law of God and to all other institutions and orders of life unless they pass the test of the free market. Free market economics then becomes totalitarian and absolutist. It becomes idolatry. Some hold that the family and prostitution and normal and perverted sexuality must compete on a free market basis. Narcotics and good food are reduced to the same free market test. In brief, anything and everything goes because there is only one law, the free market, and only one value, the free market. One person contends that there should be no title to property, but only the right of access by everyone who is able to command the power and money to take the property. In other words, a free market for power and violence as well. Any value derived from any other sphere, or any principal judgment derived from a transcendental order, from God, must compete on a free market basis, it is held. This is simply saying that the free market is God, and that it is the absolute and sole value in the universe. It assumes that there is no God beyond the market, no other law, no other value than the free market. Moreover, because the free market has its truth in the economic sphere, they sit back smugly, satisfied that they have the key to life. The Marxists, no less than other totalitarians, stress one or two partial, quote-unquote, truths, which they use to exclude all truth and God, and the same is true of those who reduce the world to matter. The free market religionists are really great enemies of free market economics, in that they pervert an instrument of freedom into a form of totalitarianism. It is not surprising that many free market religionists have, in recent years, been very congenial to the New Left. Both are alike in their strident totalitarianism. The political religionists, however, are far more numerous. They believe in salvation by the state, and even when democratic or republican in their governmental forms, they are essentially totalitarian. Contrary to Webster's dictionary, a state can have many political parties and still be totalitarian. Let us examine how this is possible. First, a totalitarian state either denies God or ignores him because it is, to all practical intent, the ultimate power in its universe. By denying or ignoring the transcendental and sovereign God, a state makes a major and decisive step into totalitarianism. It says, in effect, I am God, and beside me there is no other power in my realm. Second, a totalitarian state, having denied God, assumes the role of God by taking control over every area of life: education, health, welfare, the family, the church, private associations, and all things else. As the predestinating God, the state insists on working out a plan for every area of life, and it progressively requires strict obedience to that plan. The plan represents the godlike wisdom of the state in its concern for its creatures, and to oppose the plan is to be seen as a devil and an enemy of the state. Third, this means, of course, that for political religionists, all the problems of life can be solved by political action, by and through the state. This requires the control of science, medicine, property, money, education, and everything, so that the state can marshal all its powers to overcome the obstacle at hand. Not surprisingly, politicians speak of the conquest of war, ignorance, poverty, disease, and even death as legitimate objects of statist action. If all power is of this world, not of God, then all answers are of this world and from man organized as a state. Because it is believed that total power is in man, total power is sought in and through man's great agency, the state. Fourth, as long as the people of the state are largely political religionists, people who believe in salvation by politics, all their political parties will share this faith. In virtually every country today, political parties, whatever their differences on methods and measures, do believe in salvation by politics. Theirs is a statist totalitarianism, as against the free market religionists' totalitarianism of the marketplace. Quite rightly, therefore, Huntford speaks of Sweden, which has more than one political party, as totalitarian, and he sees the same elements of totalitarianism in varying degrees in other Western nations. In his very important study, he sees Sweden as an approximation of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and the rest of the West as nations in quest of the same goal. Roland Huntford, The New Totalitarians, New York, New York, Stein and Day, 1971. The only valid answer to totalitarianism of every variety is a biblical faith which denies all philosophies of immanence and holds to the sovereignty of the triune God. The ultimate standard, power, and authority in the universe resides not in the state, nor the marketplace, nor in physics, mathematics, nor in anything else which pertains to the created order. To God alone belongs dominion, power, and authority. There is no ultimacy in the created universe, only change, the possibilities of change, either to grow or to decline, and sin, a transgression of God's law and order. There is also obedience, the possibility of progress towards God's purpose for us, purposeful growth toward an established goal. There is, moreover, freedom. Since ultimacy belongs to God, only God can bind man by his decree. Man has no right to bind his fellow man by any man-made concept or law. Only God's law is binding. Man is thus freed from his worst oppressor, man. A philosophy of immanence leads to totalitarianism, because it places all power and authority in the present order of things, and it gives man no supreme court of appeals in God against the world. Wherever and whenever a philosophy of immanence has governed men to any degree, to that degree, totalitarian tyranny has also governed men. The power of the modern state is very great, and it is totalitarian, but it rests on a false faith. That faith is crumbling now, but it is not enough for men to become bitter at a particular form of totalitarianism. They must reject the faith which undergirds it, which means that they must reject it first in themselves. It also means more than a humanistic and pietistic return to religion. Men have often looked to God as a life raft, a spare tire, and an insurance policy in case of trouble, or as an aid to life. In a very humanistic bit of advertising, we are told, "The family that prays together stays together." True enough, but is that the purpose of praying? And is it not an offence to the sovereign God to see the purpose of prayer merely as family togetherness? The triune God must, above all else, be for us the sovereign Lord, authority and power, whom we serve and obey, because it is the essence and requirement of life to do so. Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. The power of the God with whom we have to do is not the blundering, brutal power of man and the state, but an all-wise, all-holy government which is mindful of every hair of our head, Matthew chapter 10, verse 30, and whose victory and purpose are assured. Life has always been a time of testing, and it is no less so now. It is also a time of choosing, a time when men choose and are chosen, when men reveal what they are and then move in terms of it. If we are governed by our fears of men, then we are governed by men. And if we are governed by our humanistic love of man, then we are governed by man. The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25. How safe are you? There is nothing in our creeds about defeat. Rather, in the glorious words of Benedictus, God hath raised up an horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, that we should be saved from our enemies, and from the hands of all that hate us, that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him, all the days of our life. Luke chapter 1, verse 71, verses 74 and 75. Having this assurance, St. Paul declared, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say, rejoice." Philippians chapter 4, verse 4.